Welcome to the Independent Workforce, the podcast where we explore the now and the future of work through the lens of temporary employment, such as freelancers, contractors, fractional experts, you name it. Here we speak with CEOs, recruiters, founders, and industry leaders about how they work with independent talent, the wins, the challenges, and the lessons learned. My name is Yurii. I'm growing the freelance market at freelancermap, an international platform that's been connecting top independent professionals with companies for over 20 years. And my guest is John Winsor, one of the world's leading voices shaping the future of work, an executive fellow at Harvard Business School's Digital Design and Data Institute, the founder and chairman of Open Assembly, and the author of Open Talent, a landmark book on how companies can tap into global freelance expertise to solve their biggest challenge. And the person that I've heard about from so many previous guests, and someone I can't wait to talk to. So, welcome, John.
Hey, thanks, Yurii. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Just before the recording, you told me that you've been in this independent talent market for I don't know how many years. I cannot even pronounce that amount of years because it's more than I'm alive. And I'm curious, how did you start? What made you jump into this, let's call it freelance world?
Yeah, I mean, I started because I bought a publishing company. I owned a publishing company, and I bought a bigger magazine called Women's Sports and Fitness. And at the time, Women's Sports and Fitness, this was in 1985, so a long time ago. But at the time, one of the issues was they had 40 people in their editorial department, editors and writers. And I just thought it was odd. I thought it was odd that you would have a writer from New York that would say, come to Boulder, where I live, Boulder, Colorado, and interview a friend of mine, say Lynn Hill, who's a really amazing rock climber. And then, maybe the writer doesn't really know much about rock climbing. So they would do an article about rock climbing for Women's Sports and Fitness, but it wasn't very authentic because they just didn't know. And so I kind of flipped the paradigm. I just asked a really silly question. I was like, why can't we let Lynn write her own story and be really authentic? And then we'll hire an editor to actually do the editing for her story. And that worked really, really well, and so that kind of started on my journey that, it was an imperative, I think, from for me, because I was just a, small entrepreneur and I needed new ways to work with people. And I wanted to empower people to really tell their authentic story.
Can you guide me a little bit from 1985, maybe for 5-10 years? How did you see this independent market was changing?
Yeah, so I got really into the idea of co-creation. I mean, before there was crowdsourcing, there was co-creation. And the idea of co-creation was that, and what we saw over and over again is that if you take kind of early adopters, there's a really great book from the 1950s actually called Diffusions of Innovation, and Malcolm Gladwell kind of based his tipping theory, tipping point book on that as well. And the idea is that there are, innovators and early adopters, and then kind of Jeffrey Moore is another writer, talked about crossing the chasm into kind of the majority of people. And we found that we could be predictive if we worked with early adoptive consumers for brands. So we did that with our readers. We thought of our readers as early adopters. And when I sold that company to Condé Nast, I really got into the idea. I wrote a couple books on co-creation and really got into the idea of let's find those early adoptive consumers in different areas. And it's not always the same, right? Some people think about oh, that person's like an innovator. Well, I would suggest that if you're in a neighborhood, right, it's probably a grandma in the neighborhood that's like the very best, the innovator in getting stains out of some kind of clothing. And so, we have all these parts of our lives. Sometimes we're like early adopters and innovators, and other times we're total laggards. There are a lot of things in my life that I like. Living in a big city, I'm a total laggard. I would never do that. I wouldn't know how to do it. So that was the work, right? And I started a research and strategy company, and it did. We were really successful. Worked with Nike and Levi's and Intel and HP and a bunch of other folks, and then I kind of met a guy. I was selling the company to WPP out of London, and I met a guy named Alex Bogusky who had a small creative agency in Boulder. He just moved to Boulder from Miami, and we were, really passionate about the same kind of things. He rode mountain bikes, and so did I, and so we started riffing about putting our companies together, and we took the ideas that I had built in my books and in the research that I did, and really focused on how do we co-create with our customers, are the brands that we worked with, whether it was Microsoft or Miller Brewing or Domino's or Volkswagen, and that worked really, really well. We went from 100 of us to 1,200 of us in 2 years, putting co-creation at the center of the strategy, and then created this momentum and became creative agency of the decade, which was amazing, right? It's just this high growth. But one of the real frustrations that we had was that we had 1,200 people working for us, and all the while we had a 60% turnover in the creative department, and that was super frustrating. And we won some new business. We didn't have enough creatives to do the business. It was Bramo, which was an electric motorcycle company. And so we thought to ourselves, wow, why don't we just, crowdsource some creative ideas? This is back in 2008, 2009. And it was amazing. Like all the people we wanted to hire, to move to Boulder who couldn't come. Let's just say there was a great creative that a woman in London who was married to an investment banker. She just couldn't afford to move to Boulder. Likewise, there might be a young surfer from Sydney, and he just wouldn't move, to Boulder. He just needed to be closer to the ocean. But if we created that work, or we offered up that work on a digital platform, they could do the work from wherever they were. And so it worked really, really well. And the thing that I thought that was really cool, but what I really loved about it is it really pissed off all the other agencies in the world. They were really pissed because we were just this, we just won this award from the most creative agency, having the most creative people. And we were essentially kind of flaunting that and saying, like, we're not the most creative. There are a lot of other people in the world that are really creative, and you got to do that. And so that worked really well. And then I launched a company called Victors and Spoils, which was an ad agency based on crowdsourcing principles, and went on quite a really radical ride on the power of using independent talent around the world. It just proved the idea that, there's brilliance everywhere, and there's, brilliance is abundant and opportunities are scarce. And we just offered a platform that allowed for that, the opportunities to people from all over the world. And the thing that turned me on so much was that, there would be a single mom in Cyprus that was an amazing graphic designer that could, slay any New York, ad agency graphic designer, and she would do great work for us. Or the thing that impressed me most, and the story I love to tell, is a couple of years in, we won the global business for Harley Davidson. And when we did that, it was a kind of a crazy story in and of itself. But what we loved about it, what I loved about it, is a guy, Whit Hiller, who was from Lexington, Kentucky, kind of a small town in the Midwest of the U.S. He tried to get a job with agencies in New York and L.A. and London, and he never even had the courtesy of having his emails returned. And yet he came to our platform, and he did the brand anthem for Harley Davidson, and he won $150,000 the first year working for us. And 2 years later, he was called by the press, by a magazine called Adweek, as one of the top 10 creatives in the world. And so I love this, right? The idea that there's somebody out there that's really amazing, and they just don't have the opportunity to apply themselves. And so that really blew up the whole ad market. And I think you can see the vestiges of Victors and Spoils. We were the seeds of the revolution that, now most agencies use lots of freelancers to do the work that they do. I ended up selling that company to Havas out of Paris and became chief innovation officer of Havas. And I tried really hard to change Havas to be able to work with more independent people, but they just weren't into it. They thought of themselves as the world's best. And there's so much ego and arrogance in a lot of these big companies that they're not willing to really, share in the work, and I think that's been my lifelong mission, to try to break that trend. So
how does it work for you?
What portion of it? How does what work?
Like your mission, like how does it work for you right now?
Well, so I've gone from like being, in the trenches of building companies, which I loved, right? It was super fun. Then after Havas, I joined Harvard and helped with the Laboratory for Innovation Sciences, that we built all the stuff for NASA, right? So Jeff Davis and Steve Rader came to us, and we helped build the Center of Excellence and the NASA Tournament Lab, and really launched it, and just saw scientifically that this is the future of work, that projects are going to be taskified. I think, in the context of the work that we do now. So I've gone from, LISH, which is one of our laboratories, to DQ'd, which is Digital Data and Design Institute, which we have 14 labs kind of studying the future of work, and especially the effects of AI. But I think in this age of AI, what we're seeing is AI is a further democratization of tools for the future of work. And so, you give a good coder anywhere in the world the power of an LLM that they can code with, and they can pretty much do anything especially if they have a bit of brilliance and they can teach themselves really quickly. And so we're really trying to study that and see what the effects of that. But I think what's happening, just like COVID, like you said in the intro, COVID was such a huge accelerant to remote work and to this kind of stuff. And I think you're going to see AI doing the same thing, because I think that the idea of jobs is going away, and the ideas of like companies need outcomes, and the best way to get to those outcomes is to taskify that work and to apply the best humans to get that work done. And it could be for a day, for an hour, for a month, or for a full time. But that ability of kind of unbundling the tasks from the jobs and really focusing on outcomes means that you don't need people to be hired full time to do things. You need to be focused on what the outcome you need to achieve. So that's been my focus, and now I'm just spending my time writing books and writing and giving speeches and having a good time. I've done this for so long, and at my heart, I'm really a dirtbag climber and surfer, and so I've had a house in Mexico a long time. Actually, I'm taking off on Sunday to go back down there, and because there's going to be a swell coming in, and so those are my priorities. And I'd rather be kind of on the surfboard or on the rock somewhere climbing, and so in this phase of my life, it's perfect, right? I am a freelancer. I freelance and give speeches. I freelance to write articles, and I try to create the space that I want for my life. And that's what I've always loved about this idea of a freelancer, or what I would even call like this new age of micro entrepreneur, that we all have to learn the skills of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And, we have to hustle for the work, but we also have the free time to do what we really want to do as well.
I feel like you already live in this future of work. So it's not like now of work, already future of work. And once again, 95% of people I talk to, they still stuck, let's call it, in the past of work, because they still see that the only one way to work is like having people full time. Even they are coming back from like being hybrid. They're coming back asking everyone to sit in the offices. And then people are doing this job that they can do like so much faster, even like, for me, myself, I'm a freelancer, so I'm imagining I'm saving at least 2 hours commuting daily. So in these 2 hours, I can do, first of all, a lot of job, or I can go work in a park and work on my mental health, or just put my kid to school or whatever. And once again, so how to encourage these people who are living in the past of work, like how to help them see this future of work, like what arguments do you usually use when you talk to such people?
Well, so I would say, that I don't know if we'll be able to convince the current, historical clients. I think that, I've always had this question, right? Can companies from the past make it to the future? And I don't know if that's possible. I think if you're built in the past, just like if you were a buggy whip company, or a horse cart company back in those days, and cars came along, you're kind of, if you don't reinvent yourself, you're kind of toast. And I think we're in that age right now. Like if companies don't reinvent themselves in a massive way, then they're going to be toast. And the great thing about the way that work is going is speed is a strategic advantage. You can't take 6 months to hire somebody and have them do something. You need the work done tomorrow, right? You've got to get it out. And so freelance, just people that you can aggregate that are passionate about the work, that are trained, that are ready to go, that really want to do the work tomorrow or today, is really the future. Yeah, I totally sympathize with you on, or at least agree with you on this idea that it's something that's been around for a long time. And I found it so curious, right? Because one of the stories I love to tell is in 2001, I was in Mexico, and I was trying to figure out how to, I had a company, but I was writing a book, and I was trying to figure out how to communicate. In our little town, we didn't have any connection. We had like 4 or 5 public phones, but there weren't any private phones, and there was no internet connection. And a buddy of mine, Brian, had driven down from Canada with about 6 big, Canadian satellite dishes from Hughes. And so I bought a satellite dish from him for, I think it was like $1,500 in 2001. And then we actually poured cement on my roof and figured out how to attach the satellite dish, went to the payphones and called and lied the Canadian arm of Hughes Internet or Hughes Satellites, and told them we were in Northern Ontario, which is a province in northern Canada, got the codes, and we were set up. And so in 2001, I had this, horribly slow internet connection, but it was awesome, right? I could work, I could surf all day and work at night and do whatever I wanted to do. And it was really liberating. And so when people talk about the brilliance of remote work, it's just so funny to me because it was possible a long time ago, but just the tools were really hard to work with, right? And it was just really slow. And so I think what we're seeing is the tools becoming much, much more adaptive. And I think AI is going to do that even more, give us the ability to train really quickly, to get the work done. My sense is that things are going to go away from being time-based and being more result-based and outcome-based. And so this continues to push to a new way of organizing things. So what I guess maybe I'm just getting too old, but and I'm impatient, and it's like, I can't convince people to do this in a different way. There's so much. I find what interesting, right, is companies have this natural cycle, and there's just this real big fear when they're mostly successful companies, that when they have something figured out and they do it in a certain way, they really focus on protecting that. They're not willing to change. And it's like, well, change is going to happen whether you like it or not, right? I love that quote from, I think it was some US military guy that said, if you don't like change, you'd like irrelevance even more. And I think a lot of companies are faced with that, right? All of a sudden you see these kind of AI born companies that, the vision of a one-person billion-dollar company. I think it's real. I think it's ability for one freelancer to be able to set up a company and really rock the world and change the world in a positive way.
This episode of The Independent Workforce is brought to you by FreelancerMap, the home of freelancing. Whether you are looking to hire top freelance talent fast or a freelancer ready to find your next big project, FreelancerMap connects the right people with the right work. No endless job boards, no guesswork, just direct access to verified experts and opportunities across the globe. Visit freelancermap.com and start building your next success story today. I feel like companies nowadays feel more about AI. They are more interested in using technologies and AI. And we see a lot of layoffs here and there, everywhere. They're laying off full-time people and they're kind of hiring technologists, let's call them. But why should they care about hiring independent talents? So you talked a little bit about the speed, about accessing the best talents, but they will tell you, no, we have AI, we don't need it. We have AI, we have speed, we access the best talents just by using AI. So why should they care about working with freelancers?
Yeah, well, I just think, like you described it earlier, I think that there's a couple reasons. I think there's a bunch of stuff, but I think that, when companies set themselves up, they have a task to get done. And so strategically, when it's a big company, not everybody understands the strategy and the need to change. So they try to really exploit the opportunity. And so there's no time for somebody at a mid-level to do things in a new way. They're told what to do and they do it. If you're a freelancer, a micro entrepreneur, if you're going to be relevant, you got to be learning all the time. And I think that's one of the key, successes of freelancers is this motivation to be a learner and to be focused on the future. And so those people, freelancers become much, much more attractive to companies because they are learning. They're figuring out what's happening. They're trying new things. They're pushing the limits. I think the thing that's been broken is assessment. So I would say my latest thinking is that, for some reason, and it's just a mental shift, but I think that the way that we've thought about work is that the talent, the human, is the atomic unit of work, right? That's the smallest level. And I think that's wrong in the age of AI. I think it's actually assessment. Assessment is the atomic unit. And what I mean by that is I think assessment needs to change so that it's real time, so that we understand, or you as a freelance designer or software engineer understand, where do I stack? How am I doing compared to other people, comparing to the projects I did? How successful am I? And then building technology to, AI agentic coaches to help you, you've got partners that are teaching you new skills every day, so that, a client can come to a platform or directly to you and look at a score and look at your latest assessment that happened today, real time, and say, wow, Yuri's up to speed on these things. and he ranks, he's worth hiring, right? So I think one of the things that happens, and the reason that employment went the way it did, is that it was a lack of trust. It was a way to create trust in a system. It's like one way to create trust in a system for large companies is to create controls, right? I'm going to demand that you come to the office at a certain time and you do this certain thing. And I have these policies and I'm going to control your behavior to make sure that I get the outcome that I want. And I just think that's an archaic way to do it. The trust needs to be built into new things that allows for companies to go faster. How do we have a mechanism instead of this long process of hiring, of trying to identify the right content, then resumes, then interviews? What we should care about is like, what's the unit of work? Like, what do we need to try to get done? Who's the best talent that can do that? Is it going to take an hour or a day or a week or a month? And then let's figure out a way to get the work done. Let's focus on the work instead of focusing on some kind of archaic structure that tries to bake in, control into the system to be a proxy for trust.
I feel like many companies are still focusing on titles, not on the work, because they're not hiring someone to solve the challenge, to solve the task, to create a project, but they hire specific title that is lack in their structure. And as you've said, if we are talking especially about like corporates, like huge corporates, there is a lack of responsibility. Someone is responsible and kind of like protecting their small piece of work, and no one wants to see the bigger picture. And I'm curious, like from your perspective, like you're working with different companies, with many leaders, who has to be responsible inside the company for this change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the CEO, right? I think the CEO has to have a mandate that they want to see change. And I don't think it's like, it can't be just, like you can't just say the words, you got to actually change. Like I heard this thing lately that I just love the paradigm. It's like, yeah, no CEO is going to adopt, AI, a large company CEO, because they have AI already. It's called an executive assistant. They just say, hey, instead of typing a prompt into a computer, they just talk to their executive assistant and saying, here's the things I need to get done. And so they don't understand the power of LLMs. It's really hard. So I think the recommendation is that the top leaders need to adapt to this new world, right? It's not an adoption. It's actually an adaptation. Like this is a species, like level adaptation we need to go through. And those are really rugged because they mean that systems, need to change. And so I think it starts with the CEO. It means usually that, what we've always advocated for is setting up some kind of center of excellence so that you have a learning function inside the organization to keep up with the latest, ideas and be able to apply those ideas experimentally against some of the things that you're working on individually. And so, and then also just allow people to play with it and experiment and break things. I find it so fascinating, that in my life, right, as an entrepreneur, as a surfer, as a climber, it's like the amount of time you fail is like disproportionately higher than your success rate. What makes you good at doing and pushing new things on, in the world of climbing on the rock is your willingness to accept failure in a radical way, right? So I would say, like 1 out of 10 climbs might be successful. And I think some of that happens in business, right? I think in the VC world, certainly that failure is accepted and sometimes in some of the other financial markets. But mostly for large organizations, they're really, really, really risk adverse, right? They're really, really failure adverse. And I think that's where it starts, is willing to say, we don't have it figured out. We're not going to figure it out. We're going to we need to adapt. We need to break things, figure things out. And that's just really hard for people to do, right? People like security and they like, they don't like change. And it's really it's an existential threat for a lot of people.
What I hear in between the lines for like the kind of advice for companies, like go and fail in hiring freelancers.
Go and fail at everything, right? I mean, I just expect that you're going to fail, right? But how do you know? Like you can sit down and write, a really great, outcomes-based job description for a freelancer, for an employee, but until you know viscerally where the success is and where the failures are and how to build it, you're not going to know. You don't know until you don't know. Or you don't know until you know. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, and the more you know, the more you don't know. So it's always like this.
Exactly. I know, right? Oh God, the world becomes so nuanced.
You were talking about, a little bit about AI. So I'm curious, How are AI and automation changing the freelance market and the global workforce overall?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the freelancers, if they're not, if they're not building AI workflows into their systems and figuring that out, that they're going to be toast. But it's no different than companies, right? If companies can't build that stuff in, then they're going to be toast as well. And so there's an existential threat for all of us to figure out this stuff. And, it's terrifying. It's terrifying that so much change is happening. It's terrifying and anxiety ridden. And so I think you've got to really focus on what those tools are. I think there's like 4 ways that humans are really powerful in this age of AI. I think it's judgment. Human judgment is still really important, but you get that judgment from lots of failure, right? From lots of experiences. And trust, it's the human to human trust that's really important in anything. The ability to integrate new tools into your workflows and be able to solve problems. And then brand, like you've got a different brand, I've got a different brand. We all have these kind of, the way we show up in the world is really our brand. And, people like to work with certain kinds of people. And so but we need to really lean into that instead of try to avoid that or try to be adopt something we're not really, it's not who we are. So.
I read a lot of different researches and I listen to different experts, especially those people who are talking a lot about the future of work, about freelance and about this independent talent economy. And there are different analysis. And some people say that forecasts that somewhere in like few years, it will be like millions and billions on freelancers all over the world. And some like very, very radical are even saying like, oh, everyone will be freelancing. I still don't really believe that everyone will be freelancing, but who knows? We don't know. And still, I'm curious, how do you see the role of freelancers evolving in this global workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be much bigger. I don't know. I would say, take anybody who calls himself an expert as, with a grain of salt, because there are no experts, right? We all have our own little tiny lenses. We're looking through this little peephole into the world and trying to understand, and recognize that. I mean, I think people do have more experience and they can speak to that, and that's really great. I believe in that. I believe that freelancers will be the dominant way that people will work. I think that, from a US perspective, it's quite terrifying because we can't get our shit together as far as, the ability to support, our citizens with healthcare and pensions and things like that. And so I think those countries that have set kind of social safety nets up that allow people to take a risk, right, are going to be way more successful. And I've spent a ton of time in Mexico and around the world doing the things I love to do. And I'm always so blown away by the other places. There's so much more entrepreneurial than in the US. I'm sure in Poland, in a way, there's kind of this existential threat. You got to figure out a way to survive. So you got to be a hustler and you got to get it done. And so, that's a big thing. You can't just sit back and be in a big corporate job. There just aren't as many corporate jobs around. And so there's less security from that perspective, kind of a balance, right? There's more social security, but there's less kind of corporate security.
Yeah, it's something that people still have in their mind, that it's secure, that it's like guaranteed that you will have a job tomorrow, but no one knows, like you can be just laid off like very, very fast. And sometimes you won't even see anything. Yeah, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get some severance package, but it's not guaranteed once again. And you also told like before that change whether you like it or not. And I'm curious from your perspective, if companies that currently are not working with flexible talent, if they don't adapt their processes for flexible talent, what are they risking? Like what risks do they face? What they will lose in, let's say, like few years and maybe like 5 years?
Yeah, they're just going to be left behind, right? I think it doesn't matter which company that you have, that just like that there's an existential threat. I mean, there's some that have built over a long period of time structures and kind of systems that allow them to be really successful. Companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Amazon that really that focus on a few things that are kind of their strategic advantage. But those are really rare, right? I mean, those are real. You just don't see many of those. For the average company, they can't, like I feel like companies like Amazon, they bend the future, they have the ability to kind of bend the arc of history. But for most companies, they don't have that ability. They have to be adaptive and they have to figure out where the world's going, and the world's shifting really, really quickly. And so you've got to be willing to admit that you don't know, right? And that's the hardest thing for leaders to do. And most people don't know what the hell's going on. And so you got to you got to have a learning mentality. And I think that there's, you know, when I do see CEOs that say, I don't know what's happening. I want to learn and I want to be involved and I want to surround myself with the best and smartest people. It tends to be a system that's very much freelance oriented, right? Like a bunch of independent workers that have independent point of view that challenge the CEO in a certain way, that create that kind of really good momentum. So,
I wish to have the sky as the limit, but time is the limit to our conversation.
it
So
is.
the final question, what advice would you give to companies that just starting to use freelancers and to freelancers who are just entering this independent market?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's take the freelance side, you know, to begin with. I would say freelancers have to have the mentality that they're a CEO. They're a CEO of their own company. They have to not just do the work, but they have to sell the work. They have to, much more broad view of what it is that they do. And so, all those things that everybody suggests, building a brand, communicating their ideas, being out in the world. It's not just about the work. For the company side of things, I think just taking more risks that, in this age of AI and this age of independent work, that it's very apparent to me that most companies that don't have more modern structures and can't go fast, that they're going to be, out of business. They will be out of business in the next 5 years. And so it's really incumbent to get in the game, to use independent workforce, be able to build that kind of momentum in a really powerful way. And you'll be successful. I think, you'll get a chance to try and maybe, I think it's all trying to define what success is. Right. I've sold a lot of companies and I don't know if that's always been, it feels like it's a marker of success in the context of what the world expects success is, but I don't know if I felt successful in that. So I think it's redefining what success is and what it means and how you kind of view your company. A lot of times, nothing's forever. So the company that you're building might be a stepping stone to something new and birthing kind of something new that is more AI native and freelance native. So we'll see. The world is a wild and woolly new place. So we've all got to be prepared for the ride.
I'm just talking to CEOs of I'm not talking about like huge companies, but maybe like medium-sized companies who were working the same way for like 20, 30 years. And if I'm saying to them like, hey, here's the future of work, it's like you are getting like skill shortage, you are getting less access to talents. If you want them, you have to go freelancers. And they're like, no way, what are you telling me? I don't trust you. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, I just point to case studies, right? My own case studies, the case studies at NASA, and just say, you can believe that. But when we've taken the time to do the work that we've done at NASA or at Victors and Spoils and all the stuff we've done at Harvard, we know that, using freelance talent is as good or better work, 4 to 5 times faster, 8 to 10 times cheaper. And I'm not talking about paying somebody 8 to 10 times cheaper. I'm talking about all the systems around that person, the friction of hiring managers and HR people. It's just like so expensive. Instead of allowing a hiring manager or allowing a software engineer to hire a freelancer to help them out to be more successful, cutting all that bullshit out and just really getting to focus on the work and the outcomes.
For those who want to find those case studies, where should they go?
I just think, look at my book, Open Talent. I have a lot of those. And then I think just, follow, there's some great stuff. Matt Matola's doing some great stuff at Human Cloud. And, I write a bunch all the time. And so there's a lot of ways to do that and just be a part of the conversation. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, sometimes they're staying away, but we are not leaving them any chance to stay away, because if you want to grow, be a part of the conversation. Otherwise, you'll be missed. Maybe, maybe not. And last but not least, name 2 people I should reach out to talk about the independent workforce.
Oh man, that's a great question. I think you should definitely talk to Mike Morris from Torque, who, he's an OG. I think he started at Top Coder in 2001, so he's seen it all, knows it all. I think that's a really important one. And I would definitely reach out to Carol Chang at Andela. And I think she's doing some really, really amazing work. And the reason she's doing such amazing work is because she spent 10 years driving the kind of the driver experiences and operations at Uber. So she really gets the idea of independent workforce and the power of brilliance is abundant and opportunities are scarce.
Got it. Got it. And what is the best way to connect with you?
Just, the best thing to do is just follow me anywhere like LinkedIn or through Harvard. Or just, go to my website, johnwinsor.com, or my company website, open-assembly.com.
Got it. John, thank you so much. First of all, for what you are doing in growing this
thanks.
independent and freelance market. And, when I was talking to you, you made it feel so easy that I was even like, you don't even have to, it's like non-negotiable that you have to work with freelancers, because like you just phrase it in this way, like you either do it or you die. There is no other way. And I was like, oh my God, it's so easy.
It's so easy, right? Well, when you're pushed up against the wall, there's just, your choices are limited. It's easy to make a decision.
Yeah. And thank you so much for this conversation. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I learned so many things, and you are a real OG here. So thank you for being the amazing you.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me.
And see you in the freelance world. And for listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Independent Workforce. I hope you've taken one step closer to working smarter with freelance talent. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to learn even more and share it with your colleague. And remember, the future of work is now.